What's good, everybody? It's Pop430 here, and welcome back to another tier list video. Well, by the time this video drops, Godzilla Kong the New Empire should be releasing very soon, which will make it the 38th film, yes, the 38th film of the Academy Award-winning Godzilla franchise. And I say Academy Award-winning because recently, Godzilla Minus One won an Oscar for Best Visual Effects, which is absolutely insane when you think about that any Godzilla film would win any type of award outside of Japan. That is monumental. To celebrate Godzilla Minus One's historic Oscar win, and to celebrate 10 years of the Monsterverse, we are here to rank every single Godzilla film. However, this is going to be split into 4 separate videos, which each video highlighting each era of Godzilla. So the first video is going to be about the Showa era, the second video is going to be about the Heisei era, third about the Millennium, and fourth we're going to combine the Rhea era and the Monsterverse era. This is probably going to be a very long process to make, so if you're new here, make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, and comment down below what's your favorite Showa era film. So with all that being said, let's get started with the first video highlighting all of the Showa era Godzilla films. Let's get started. Now, for the Showa era is truly unique, as not only is it the first era for Godzilla, but it's also the most important. Now, hear me out on this. Without the differentiating Godzillas throughout the series, throughout the 20 years of the Showa era, from the first one being Godzilla being a symbol of nuclear damage and the horrors of using atomic bombs on humanity, he went from being an anti-hero in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, all the way to being a full-blown hero and a father figure inside of Godzilla in All Monsters Attack. That ability to where there is no wrong Godzilla, it can be whatever you want it to be, and that's what makes Godzilla truly unique. You can have a serious film like Godzilla Minus One and Gojira, and then you can have a cute film, like a kid film with Godzilla vs Megalon and All Monsters Attack. Without that ability to differentiate and be unique, I don't think we'd be having Godzilla movies all the way up to 2024 and be celebrating its 70th anniversary. That is insane to me, and that's why the Showa era is truly important. So let's get right down to business and start it off with the first one ever made, Gojira. Okay, here we go. The very first Godzilla movie ever made, and this could be the obvious, easiest answer ever. S+ tier. I mean, should I be a surprise to anybody? This is one of the best Godzilla films ever made, and just in general, one of the best films ever made. The grandfather of kaiju films, this is the gold standard on what a kaiju film can be. The use of practical effects, the music, and Godzilla himself were the true cornerstones for not only kaiju films, but for other monster films as well. I mean, without Godzilla, we probably wouldn't have Reptilicus. Whether or not that's a good or bad thing is entirely up to you, but the fact of the matter is that Godzilla and King Kong, if you want to be really specific too, were the originators of how big monster films should be made. Godzilla has one of the most iconic soundtracks ever made, being on par with the likes of John Williams and Hans Zimmer. Akira Ifukube, throughout his decades-long career, would be instrumental in adding iconic pieces of music for not only Godzilla films, but various other Toho films as well. Heck, even some newer Godzilla films are using different music from the Mysterians, Varan, into the Godzilla films, which is really interesting and cool to see that they're all sort of intertwined and connected with each other. I don't want to talk too much about this film until I talk about a certain other film, but we won't get to that point for at least a while. However, I'll briefly talk about the English edited version of this film called Godzilla King of the Monsters, known at the 2019 release, but the one released all the way back in 1956, featuring Raymond Burr. And honestly, the movie does take away from a lot of the messages and meaning for Gojira. It's really just a simplified version of Godzilla, even though, in my opinion, Raymond Burr does not do a bad job in this film. Him narrating throughout the horror and carnage of Godzilla's rampage through Tokyo was actually really well done in my opinion, and I'm glad he returned in Return of Godzilla because I thought he did a really good job in this film.
A prehistoric monster the Japanese call Godzilla has just walked out of Tokyo Bay. He's as tall as a 30-story building. Now he's making his way toward the city's main line of defense. 300,000 volts of electricity strung around the city is a barrier. A barrier against Godzilla. I'm saying a prayer, George. A prayer for the whole world.
Even though it is odd that he feels like an OC just inserted into the film, like, you could tell he doesn't belong, and it's just really weird how they try to insert himself into the main story, even though it's really, really poorly done. And that's about it, honestly. There isn't much more to add that so many other people have said about this movie. Whether Godzilla fan or not, I would highly recommend watching the movie if you haven't yet. Literally a year later, we got ourselves a sequel to the original 1954 masterpiece in Godzilla Raids Again. And yeah, this is not a good movie. The only reason why it's saved from being an F tier is due to being one of the first kaiju fights for Toho. But man, the story outside of Godzilla and Ghidorah beating the hell out of each other is a chore to get through. They even had to drag the poor scientist from the first movie, played by Takashi Shimura, into this train wreck. You can visibly see the life drain out of this poor man's soul every time he has to appear in front of the camera. If you want another great film to watch Shimura in, go watch Seven Samurai on HBO Max. I had time to watch it recently, and that movie was absolutely amazing. I would highly recommend checking it out. It's hilarious how the monsters even get to Osaka in the first place, when Larry, Curly, and Mo, while trying to evade police, accidentally drive straight into a power plant, causing a fire to erupt, leading the monsters to head to shore and start fighting. I guess I need to talk about some positives or else I'd sound too negative on this movie. Well, Anguirus is cool. Some of the music is fine. But mainly it's just Anguirus. Bring back Anguirus for Godzilla -2. And what else is there? Man, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I've been staring at this script for 10 minutes trying to think of a few positives about this movie. Like, I'm trying to sit here and think about positives for Godzilla Raids Again, and I just can't. Literally, that's it. Oh my god, it's just Anguirus and everything else is just really bad. Even the Godzilla suit I just don't like at all. Even with the creepypasta that was made for it, which is not bad, it's fine. I enjoyed it. But just like Son of Kong, another rushed sequel to a fantastic movie that luckily was saved years later by the most iconic kaiju fight in history. Before we got 2021's Godzilla vs. Kong, we had the original monster battle in 1962 with King Kong vs. Godzilla. Still the biggest box office Godzilla movie ever made, and for good reason. This movie was a monumental event, both in the US and in Japan. It's crazy to think that this was the first movie for both Godzilla and King Kong to be released in color, as the last movie for Godzilla was 7 years ago in 1955, and for Kong, it was all the way back in 1933. We ain't counting Son of Kong here, that don't count. The plot itself is hilarious considering how they get the two monsters to actually fight, as a literal pharmaceutical company goes and grabs King Kong from his home to go and use him for advertising. Yes, literal advertising. That's the only reason why King Kong is here in the first place. If that ain't a take on the horrors of capitalism and the abuse of animals, I'm not sure what is. The unique take on Kong's story was really well done, but just like in the 2021 movie, this movie is all about Kong, and Godzilla's more of a side character, even in this film. He's just there as a big bad villain. Still a fantastic Godzilla suit, and the final fight on Mount Fuji was really fun. Although in between the middle and end of the movie, it kinda dragged a little. It didn't take away from the movie, and it should be viewed at least once by new fans of Godzilla. This movie is going straight to B tier, a classic from the Showa era. And 2 years later, after the release of King Kong vs. Godzilla, another classic from the Showa era, we had Mothra vs. Godzilla. I remember as a kid having no idea what the original Japanese title for this movie was supposed to be. At first, I would think of this movie as Godzilla vs. a Thing, as that's all the US posters were for this movie. It would just be some weird octopus thing or a giant question mark. And I'd always be confused, as I always thought it was the Thing for the Fantastic Four, so I was thinking, why did the Thing turn into a moth and start fighting Godzilla? This movie as a kid for me was really confusing. Growing up now and seeing those posters, it's hilarious just how wrong I was, and seeing Mothra for the first time was incredible considering how gigantic Mothra was compared to Godzilla. Man, remember Godzilla used to be only 50 meters? I remember those days. I can't imagine a larger Mothra now, but back then it was entirely possible. Also, the fact that the company that kidnapped Mothra's eggs was called the Happy Company is honestly hilarious. If I saw a company called the Happy Company keeping and just holding hostage a giant Mothra egg, it would raise a few questions here and there, not gonna lie. Why is it in both the Showa era and the Heisei movies is the egg always getting snatched away? In fact, there's always a trend with Mothra, and it's really interesting to me. I also love the fact that in this movie, Godzilla is kind of a dunce, as throughout his attack on Japan, he's slipping everywhere, trips on buildings, even gets his tail stuck. But obviously the highlight here is Godzilla rising out of the dirt when all the water gets removed, which is such an amazing shot, and even the Monarch TV show would also pay homage to this scene when Godzilla rises out of the dirt in Africa. The message for this movie about trusting one another to create a better world is an endearing message that usually doesn't get talked about enough, considering that the whole movie evolves around trust and betrayal. So I thought that was really well crafted, and honestly that goes for a lot of Showa movies, that the message and themes kind of get overlooked for the monster fights, which really shouldn't be the case. Some of these movies have some great messages for them. The battle for the legality of a giant egg and the possible defamation lawsuit caused by Mothra's lost faith in humanity was a bit crazy, not gonna lie, but the movie was a great watch for both the story and the kaiju fights, which made Mothra a permanent figure in the Godzilla franchise for literal decades to come. This is going all the way up in A tier, one of the best. For Godzilla's 10th anniversary, Toho would have its biggest monster collaboration to date by both having Godzilla Mothra return, but also adding Rodan, a kaiju who got his own movie back in 1956, which if I had to put in this tier, I'd probably put it in A tier, as I love Rodan. I love Rodan's design in the first one, it was fantastic. The Megalon still terrify my brother, even to this day. We also got introduced to a new monster for all three monsters to face. That will be known as Godzilla's arch nemesis and most iconic villain. That's right, it's a debut movie of King Ghidorah. I mean, what gave it away? The name, Ghidorah the three-headed monster? Nah, surely not. The movie starts off insane, with not only a giant meteorite falling into Japan, but a princess from a visiting country is told by a voice in her head to jump out of an airborne plane to escape imminent danger. How she thought falling out of a plane was a safe option, I'll never know, but somehow she survived and had amnesia, and now she believes herself to be a person from Venus who has Raven-Symone visions about impending doom, which eventually leads to Rodan and Godzilla attacking one another. It was always interesting to me how, after Mothra vs Godzilla, they had to explain why there was only one Mothra larva instead of the two. They just said, oh yeah, that one just died, now we just got one. Like, wait a minute, what do you mean one died, and how did that happen? Did a little Mothra get the monster version of smallpox or something? What happened to the other Mothra larva? My headcanon is that when the other Mothra larva died, it turned into the antithesis of Mothra, so instead of being all about life, it was all about death, which would eventually turn into Batra. That's my headcanon, so I'm sticking with it until someone gives me a better one to use. So Batra will return when he's remembered in about 20 years. This is the movie that started the eventual babyface turn for Godzilla, as when the Peacemaker Mothra fails to get Rodan and Godzilla to stop their petty squabble and stop King Ghidorah, they refuse, causing Mothra to go and fight Ghidorah all alone. It actually takes a minute for Godzilla and Rodan to step in and say, wait a minute, bullying is bad. Eventually they all work together to defeat King Ghidorah, a really memorable debut for the Golden Dragon Ghidorah, as he would be a staple for literally each and every single era for Godzilla. This movie is going straight into B tier. Another classic kaiju film. So far so good for the Showa era, let's see if Toho can keep it up. Invasion of Astro Monster, or Godzilla vs Monster Zero, or Invasion of the Astro Monster. I mean seriously, so many of the Showa era films have different movie titles, can we just stick to one please? Sarcasm aside, this movie was pretty interesting as it was the first Godzilla movie to have an American actor included in the movie. And unlike Raymond Burr's random OC in Godzilla King of the Monsters, Nick Adams actually interacts with the cast this time, and I enjoyed him in this movie, as it's a shame we don't get more movies with him in the Godzilla films, but hey, what can you do? This movie is also the first Godzilla movie to introduce the Zillions, an alien species from Planet X. No, not that Planet X from Looney Tunes. That Planet X. As they just want to borrow Godzilla and Rodan real quick, just for a quick minute, as their planet is being destroyed by Monster Zero, aka King Ghidorah. That's right, Ghidorah is back. It was just a pawn in the Zillion's master plan to brainwash both Rodan and Godzilla to destroy Earth alongside King Ghidorah. It's too bad they're evil because they have a sense of fashion. I mean, just look at the way they dress. Absolute perfection right there. What fashion icons. I did enjoy the random romance between Glenn and the Zillion woman. It's like, wait a second, man. We got monsters ready to destroy the Earth. There's no time for romance.
This is no time for women.
Also, it's odd that the HBO Max description for the movie says that aliens try to use Godzilla, Mothra, and Rodan to take over the planet, even though Mothra wasn't in this movie. Maybe they're mixing up both Ghidorah and the Invasion of Astro Monster films, just for some weird reason. I have no idea, but Godzilla dance aside, this one was okay. I prefer Ghidorah to 3-headed monster over this one, so this is going straight into C tier, an average Godzilla flick. Also, Godzilla, Rodan, and Ghidorah don't really fight. They're mainly brainwashed throughout the whole film, and at the end, they really do fight for like 3 minutes. It's kind of crazy just how short that final fight is, but C tier, it's an okay film. Could have been better, could have been worse. First off, if the rankings were going off just music alone, this movie would probably land in S tier. Masuo Sato does an excellent job with the soundtrack, and the music just slaps. That being said, I wasn't the biggest fan of this movie when I first watched it. I always saw Ebirah as a joke. You could thank Final Wars for that, and the fight between Godzilla and the giant condor, and Godzilla and the military that's on the island, or not really military, but just like an evil base, whatever, is not that good, to be honest. It's not good, I'm sorry. And turning what should have been a King Kong movie into a Godzilla movie by making Godzilla interact with a love interest, to put that in quotes, and to be woken up by lightning. Yeah, I'm not sure how and why King Kong was scrapped and Godzilla was used as a placeholder. Maybe the rights ran out, but I need to actually look that up. Why did this movie turn into a Godzilla film?
2 hours later.
Okay, so I just looked it up, and here's a direct quote from the IMDb trivia section for this movie right here. So this movie was meant to be associated with the animated TV show, The King Kong Show, but when Honda wasn't going to direct it, as I believe he was either busy directing The War of the Gargantuas or Come Marry Me, as both movies were released the same year as Ebirah in 1966. I'm not sure which one, maybe someone with more historical knowledge can fact check me on that one, but it's probably either or, I'm not really sure. You know what's weird? I've talked more about the trivia and the music more than the movie itself, so let's talk about some positives in the movie. I actually liked the fights between Ebirah and Godzilla. I thought they were really creative, and for the time the underwater fight was fun, and seeing Godzilla play volleyball with Ebirah was hilarious to see. Although again, if you just put Kong here, it makes way more sense, as why would Godzilla have trouble underwater? Also, Mothra's here. She doesn't do anything until the very end, where she saves the people from the island from the impending explosion. So, yay Mothra, her work here is done. She did a lot of work throughout this film. And that's about it, honestly. I give Ebirah Worst King Kong Escapes in D tier. Probably above Godzilla Raids Again, if I could do that. Can I do that? Thank you. Jesus, that took forever. You know, I originally had this movie placed in C tier, but making the script for this video, the more I look back at the movie, the more out of place it felt, especially given its background. It's just really weird that this is a Godzilla film. But now let's get to the real star of the Showa era. Now, my A ranking for the Godzilla suit used in this movie was apparently a tad bit controversial. I'm sorry, I'm the only one that understands the complexities of this ambitious cinematic masterpiece. The suit wasn't stupid. You're just stupid.
Am I the only one who understands the complexities of this ambitious cinematic masterpiece? This movie isn't stupid! You're stupid!
Oh, Billy, why you gotta be like that?
That being said, I can't believe I'm about to utter these words, but I actually really liked Son of Godzilla, and it's going straight into B tier. Now, Before you comment and dislike the video, hear me out. Just hear me out for a second. Don't go to the comments just yet. Son of Godzilla is an adorable movie about the struggles of being a single parent trying to teach their adopted child the horrors of surviving on Monster Island. Yeah, Kamakuras and Komanga are bottom tier kaiju, but they don't weigh down the movie that much. Seeing Minya's childish acts like playing jump rope with Godzilla's tail and him throwing a little hissy fit is hilarious. It's pure comedy gold. And that ending had me crying. How could you not get emotional seeing that scene of Godzilla and Minya embracing during the cold winter? That's just so sad. The suit is also great. If you have a different opinion on that, that's fine. You're just wrong. But it's okay to be wrong sometimes. I'm not sure where they categorize this movie as a guilty pleasure or not, but I'm putting it high on the Showa movie list regardless. Now, let's get to the quote-unquote finale of the Showa era.
Radio Paris réparti! Les subterranean monster has just broken through the ground! But Paris' most famous landmark is about to be destroyed by the monster! The people of Paris are holding their breath!
And here we go, the intended finale of the Godzilla franchise. This movie pulls no punches on the amount of kaiju there are in this movie. How many kaiju are in this movie, you ask? Oh, about all of them? Actually, there's about 11. But for the late 60s, that's a lot of monsters that added one movie. And there's a lot of destruction going on in this movie. Godzilla invades New York. Rodan invades Russia. Gorsaurus, what? Invades France. Wait, what? Why is Gorsaurus acting like Baragon in that scene? I don't know. But hey, more action is good for me. We have multiple monsters attacking at the same time. The effects done in this movie were really top notch. Some of the best in the Showa era. Some might say the best of the Showa era. But there's just one more movie that hasn't been mentioned yet that I believe holds that prize. It's such a shame that even though the effects are great, the rest of the movie and the story is pretty forgettable. For the quote-unquote finale to the franchise, the Kilaaks are honestly no different from the Zillions, which begs the question, why didn't they just use the established Zillions as the final bosses to just have a major invasion on Earth and have every monster under their control? Probably thinking too much about destroy all monsters melee here, but this movie felt super underwhelming to me. It's shockingly gonna go all the way down into C tier. I wish I could rate this movie higher, but I just can't. This movie just felt kind of underwhelming to me, and I could see why a lot of people growing up now want a more different remake to Destroy All Monsters, even though we technically get that with Final Wars, but I digress. The finale was a bit lackluster, but with new Godzilla movies on the horizon, it can't get much lower than this, right? What's that sound? Oh god. Wait, it's right now? Oh no!
Godzilla said that I should learn to fight my own battles. No.
Warning, before you watch the review of All Monsters Attack, TLDR, I was basically watching both films at the dead of night, so by the time I got finished with Godzilla's Revenge, it was like 6 a.m. and I had no sleep. Plus I took 2 gummies before watching both movies, so this is my raw, high reaction to watching both All Monsters Attack and Godzilla's Revenge. This is gonna be all unedited, all raw. You have to see the reaction because it's just hilarious. But if you don't want to, TLDR, it's F tier. It's not the worst Godzilla movie, but it is pretty bad. So if you want to go to Son of Godzilla, here's your chance. But for the rest of you, I hope you all enjoy. Long live Minya. Before I begin this, little warning. I may be a little bit stoned as to set the precedent for how I felt watching this movie. Because, my god, All Monsters Attack is just a trip. Not only that, but I say, you know what? We're gonna do my life at 3 a.m. I'm gonna go, sit down, turn on my PS5, and put in my classic media Godzilla's Revenge DVD, and see how that compares to the original that I recently watched on HBO Max. And man, doing that in 3 a.m. while making a video about Godzilla is just sad. But I digress. No, it was just seeing the movie again twice technically. Man, hearing that Minya voice in English is just atrocious. Why does he sound like an alcoholic 30-year-old man? I will never know. Hearing those words, Godzilla says I have to fight my own battles will forever etch into my soul, even when I'm close to death, on the brink of death, as I'm seeing the heaven's lights for the first time. All I'm gonna hear as I get dragged down to hell, Godzilla says I have to fight my own battles, you know. This movie is a time capsule for how Japan was in the, what was it, late 60s, beginning of the early 90s or 70s. But oh my god, this movie was just one giant clip show. It felt like a filler movie after Destroy All Monsters. I mean, I saw more of Ebirah in this movie than I did actual original footage. It was just embarrassing. Gamera is a joke of a villain. Godzilla is just there as clip fodder. And then Minya is Minya. You know, what more can I say about Minya in this movie? Yeah, I liked him in Son of a Godzilla, but here, God, I couldn't just look away. I couldn't look away. This movie is just insane. I have no words to describe how I felt about All Monsters Attack and Godzilla's Revenge. Also, looking back to the DVD, it's great to see the original Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee trailer in there. It's great. But seeing MechaGodzilla 3 in there is really weird, considering that in the GameCube version, only in Japan do you have MechaGodzilla 3. It wouldn't release until years later in the Xbox release. So that's weird. I was like, why do they have him there? I guess it's just a Japanese version they were showing off, but yeah, anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, All Monsters Attack. Do I even need to explain further? You know what's weird? You know the sad part about it is, I actually appreciate this movie more compared to the other Godzilla movies that will go to F tier, which is shocking for me to say, but this is going in F+. I give you a 59%. Good job, All Monsters Attack. You are technically not the worst Godzilla movie ever made. Good job. After All Monster Attack made me question why I was put on this earth in the first place, we arrive in the era where people begin to start associating Godzilla with more kid-friendly movies and childish moments being put into the franchise. But when it comes to Godzilla vs. Hedorah, how could anyone look at me with a straight face and tell me that this movie is childish? I mean, look at this! I do have to say that these Showa films don't get the respect they deserve when it comes to the themes and messages of these films. They have unique progressive stances on pollution and the rise of industrialization leading to more environmental disasters, which birthed the Hedorah in the first place, was really well done, and I'm sad that this kind of gets overlooked by one scene. You already saw it in the intro, so I don't even need to explain it, but mainly people associate this movie with that scene rather than the actual message and theming of this movie, which is sad to see. As I said during my ranking every Toho Kaiju that I've seen video, go check that out if you haven't already. You know I love Hedorah's design in this movie. The suit makers really outdid themselves with the design, and the ability for Hedorah to transform to cause more havoc makes Hedorah a really unique foe for Godzilla to defeat. Some scenes were honestly grotesque considering that this was a PG film at the time, and it really added to Hedorah's threat to humanity. It's a real shame we haven't had Hedorah return in any capacity in the Monsterverse, as of this recording, as Hedorah really fits the balance of nature and Hollow Earth stuff surprisingly well, so maybe soon Hedorah could one day return. This movie is going straight into the bottom of B tier. I really enjoyed it, and it's honestly one of my underrated classics of the Showa era.
Something funny going on. You better check. Oh, yeah.
Oh boy. Now, where do I begin with Godzilla vs. Gigan? For some reason, out of all the so-called worst Godzilla movies, none of them got me quite as disappointed as this movie had. Godzilla vs. Gigan, in my opinion, is the worst Godzilla movie I have ever seen. This is an example of a franchise begging to be stopped. This is a 15-year-old dog just waiting to die. This was a sad, sad movie to see. Just to see the Godzilla suit basically falling apart, the old King Ghidorah from literally, what, 1964, being used 8 years later and still looking really, really bad. I mean, it just looks rough. Poor King Ghidorah has been through the ringer. It was just sad to see. The effects are pretty lackluster, with often resorting to using old footage from other Toho films to clip into the movie. Don't get me wrong though, I like Gigan. Gigan is cool. I like using Gigan in the Pipeworks trilogy games, but seeing Godzilla and King Ghidorah on the brink of falling apart was just a sad sight to see. This movie did absolutely nothing right in my mind. The plot about the children's monster island is just hilarious, given that it's just a ploy for space cockroaches. Yes, literal space cockroaches! Even the monster fights were anything to write home about, and I can honestly say that this was the first Godzilla movie that made me want to turn off the TV and go to bed. That has never happened to me before, even when watching through All Monsters Attack. How do you make All Monsters Attack make me pay attention more than your movie? It's just embarrassing. I remember liking this movie as a kid. Was I this blind to nostalgia? This movie is going straight into F tier. Man, what a sad, sad movie. If you want a good Gigan film, go watch Godzilla vs. Gigan Rex. Alright, I'm just gonna say right now, 3 weeks? Really? 3 weeks? This is going into the D tier. Actually, at D+, the high D tier. This movie was at least more entertaining for me than Godzilla vs. Gigan, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Megalon. Gigan's also fine as Megalon's partner in this film, but the real star of this movie is, let's just be honest here, Jet Jaguar. I can't even critique the actors in this film too harshly, as probably throughout most of these scenes it was probably done in one shot or had to do multiple shots in one day, considering that this film was made in 3 weeks. That's insane to me, even though not really, 6 months of production, but you get the point. 3 weeks of filming is just insane, especially for a Godzilla film. That just shouldn't be possible. Adding Godzilla and Gigan into this film, as they're originally not meant to be in this film, as basically this was done to draw people in to watch this movie, as seeing a poor Jet Jaguar and Megalon solo film probably wasn't gonna be that big a movie to begin with, but having Godzilla here, it just really takes away from Jet Jaguar's presence. It doesn't add anything to the film, as all he's done is just take the spotlight from Jet Jaguar, causing him to become an obscure time capsule that only the die-hard kaiju fan will actively remember. And yes, you can't make me hate that tail scene. It's just too iconic, and the fact that Godzilla does it twice is absolutely hilarious. It's as if Godzilla is flexing on us to make sure that we all remember who's truly king of the monsters. Yeah, D tier, but let's see how the Showa era ends with the last 2 films of the Showa era. Well, first off, I'm going to put it in the most obvious tier I can. S tier. Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla is one of those films that define what Godzilla is truly meant to be. This movie was absolutely fantastic. You know how in my Destroy All Monsters review, I believe there was another movie that had the best effects of the Showa era? Well, here it is. The effects for this movie were absolutely outstanding and go hand in hand with the raw power that MechaGodzilla possesses. And yep, this is a movie that first introduces another iconic Godzilla character in MechaGodzilla. The best MechaGodzilla design in my opinion, although I have a soft spot for every single MechaGodzilla design that's been made recently, so that's not really saying much. However, this one is just a cut above the rest. He even gets a moment to showcase all the weapons in his arsenal. I mean, just look at this scene and tell me this doesn't scream cinema to you. The music in this movie is again some of the best in the Showa era. Masaru Sato, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it the first time when I was reviewing Godzilla vs. Ebirah. That's probably my fault. I blame my lisp on that one. He returns in this movie, and this soundtrack is just phenomenal. And I know I go on about the music in some of these Showa era films, but to be honest, the music in Godzilla movies is just as important as the kaiju fights in these films. That's why so many tracks are so iconic and reused in the new reiterations of Godzilla as well. We also get the introduction of one of the most laziest monsters I've ever seen in King Caesar, a protector deity that can only be awakened by song. Which is all well and good, but the song takes forever to finish. And why can't King Caesar just wake up when the world needs help, since MechaGodzilla was literally on the way? I'll never know. Although, King Caesar is a cool design, and the ability to reflect beams from his eyes is a great touch. MechaGodzilla is quite formidable in this movie, as he nearly takes down both Godzilla and King Caesar by himself. Heck, he even easily defeated Anguirus early on in the film, and we wouldn't see him until 2004, so that beatdown must have been horrendous. It wasn't until Godzilla gets his new magnet powers from being bullied by Thor was he finally able to defeat MechaGodzilla. This film was honestly so fantastic. This was a phenomenal film that's never dull for even a second. A must watch for any new Godzilla fan. That's why he deserves to be in S tier. After 14 films, 21 years of Godzilla, the Showa era officially ends in 1971 with their 15th film of the Godzilla franchise, with Terror of MechaGodzilla. And to be honest, it might be the shortest one yet, because all the stuff I loved in Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla is basically in here with Terror of MechaGodzilla, just without King Caesar, and now replaced with a new villain, Titanosaurus, which, not gonna lie, I've always had a soft spot for Titanosaurus, maybe because I used to have these DVDs, the classic media DVDs, back as a kid, so I always have a soft spot for Titanosaurus. But yeah, this film, honestly, it should be in B tier, but for my own personal biases, it's in A tier. Just a simple, classic, great finale, and now we end the Showa era and begin a new era, years later, with the return of Godzilla in 1985. But alright, that is it. Every single Showa era Godzilla film ranked, from Godzilla 1954 all the way down to Terror of MechaGodzilla, and then we get to the bottoms with Godzilla vs. Gigan. This was honestly a variety of good Godzilla movies, some mid and some really bad, but you know what? Without this type of era, the Showa era, being so unique and diverse, we probably wouldn't have the Heisei era, Millennium era, or the other eras to go to. So thank you, Showa era. You made Godzilla quite interesting.